The seventh reading is from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being, in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light that enlightens everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or the will of the flesh or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Our first reading today, in that reading, Isaiah gave us some powerful contrasts. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in the land of deep darkness, on them has light shined. Back in Isaiah's time, the only lights that shined in darkness, besides the stars, were oil lamps, sort of a precursor to candles. But what happens if you light an oil lamp or a candle in the glare of a floodlight? Not much. The flickering light of a candle does nothing in a place that is filled with light because there's no contrast. So I'm going to tell another story today, and that's an example of the power that can be found in just one candle. This story was originally told and put together by an online colleague who is an excellent storyteller. She collects stories and legends. I probably got the spider story from her 20-some years ago. Collects stories and legends of Christmas and puts them together and puts them out for people to use. So it's wonderful. So once upon a time, in a small town, there lived two brothers who had been rivals since childhood. They competed in everything and constantly complained about what the other did. Whenever they saw one another, they would bring up some long ago insult or whatever current infraction was the infraction of the week. Since they lived next door to each other, Martin would constantly complain that Charles parked his car too close to Martin's driveway. Charles would gripe that the leaves from Martin's tree would fall in his yard. Elizabeth and Grace, the wives of these brothers, were close friends, and they longed for the men's feuding to stop. Christmas was coming, and the two families always celebrated together, but the women never enjoyed it much. It was just another opportunity for complaining and conflict and competition. The hostility just had to end. The two women decided they were going to take the problem to the pastor of their church. For a full hour, they poured their hearts out to Pastor Vega. He listened patiently, and when they were through with their story, he rose and said, "Okay." He walked down the street to their neighborhood to visit with the two constantly bickering men. He got them together and said, "I want to have a contest with you on the day before Christmas Eve. It'll provide entertainment for the whole neighborhood. You see that old empty barn on the Kelly property? We'll divide the barn into 3 equal parts and see which of us can fill our part the fullest, using anything we'd like. If either of you win, you can have all of the fruit and vegetables I grow in my garden next summer. But if I win, you two must promise to stop arguing and learn to be friends as well as brothers." Well, Martin and Charles could almost taste the delicious tomatoes that Pastor Vega grew every year, a coveted thing in the village. They were convinced that the contest would be a slam dunk against the frail old pastor, and they each thought they could beat the other. So they readily agreed. At dawn of the day before Christmas Eve, Martin and Charles began rushing around the neighborhood, collecting anything they could find to fill their parts of the barn. Bales of hay, old buckets, abandoned car parts, sacks of potatoes, children's toy, anything they could carry. And Pastor Vega was nowhere to be seen. At lunchtime, Charles and Martin were still busily trying to fill their parts of the barn. They picked up toys and pillows, and somebody's tricycle ended up at the top of a pile somewhere, and Pastor Vega was still nowhere to be seen. As the sun began to set, Martin and Charles had both filled their parts of the barn almost to the roof, but Pastor Vega's part was completely empty. By this time, the whole neighborhood had gathered around the barn, delighting in the spectacle of two frantic men carrying piles of goods and wheelbarrows full of junk in and depositing in the barn, clambering up mountains of stuff to put on one more pillow, one more trash barrel. Finally, as darkness fell, Pastor Vega hobbled down the street from the church and walked into his part of the barn. Martin and Charles were standing with their arms folded in front of their sections, confident that they had each done each other, and certainly they had outdone Pastor Vega's empty part of the barn. But everybody watched as Pastor Vega slowly lowered himself to his knees in his part of the barn. Out of his pocket, he pulled a candle in a small brass stand. And then he spoke parts of the Gospel of John that we just heard. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. Then he struck a match and lit the candle. In the total darkness of night, the candle's light filled the whole barn, shining right up into the rafters. It shined through the empty spaces in Charles and Martin's piles, shined on the ceilings of their parts of the barn, filling every nook and crevice of that big, drafty structure. Well, there was a great cheer among the people as everybody realized that Pastor Vega had won the competition. He not only filled up his part of the barn, he filled to the brim the other two parts of the barn. Martin and Charles stepped forward. They stood over the candle and shook hands, and from that day on, they were the best of friends. A simple candle is the sign of the light of Christ that shines in every dark corner of our lives, bringing hope and compassion in our own hidden fears, bringing harmony where there's discord. We light candles every week. We can't really see their light because the sanctuary is so brightly lit. But we know that it's there. We know that if we closed up all the windows and turned off all the lights, those lights would shine to where we could actually see, it would be faint, but actually see the back of the sanctuary. So the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. Amen.